For 50 years, every barrel of oil sold anywhere on Earth was priced in dollars. Not euros, not yen, not yuan. Dollars. This wasn't economics. This was the foundation of American global power. And Saudi Arabia just broke the agreement. What I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change how you understand money, power, and the coming collapse of American dominance. The petrodollar system, established in 1974 through a secret agreement between Henry Kissinger and the Saudi royal family, created artificial demand for dollars that made America the world's financial hegemon. That system is dying, and most Americans have no idea what that means for their future. Let me take you back to 1974. The oil crisis had just devastated Western economies. OPEC's embargo had quadrupled oil prices virtually overnight. Gas lines stretched for miles. Inflation was exploding. The post-war economic order was collapsing. Richard Nixon had already taken America off the gold standard in 1971, ending the Bretton Woods system that had backed dollars with gold since World War II. The dollar was now a fiat currency, backed by nothing but trust in the U.S. government. That created a problem. If dollars weren't backed by gold, why would the world continue using them? What gave the dollar value? Henry Kissinger had an answer. Oil. He traveled to Saudi Arabia with a proposal. America would provide military protection, weapons, and political support to the Saudi royal family. In exchange, Saudi Arabia would do two things. First, price all oil sales in dollars. Not just Saudi oil, they would convince OPEC to make dollars the exclusive currency for oil transactions worldwide. Second, recycle their oil revenues back into U.S. Treasury bonds and American financial markets. The Saudis agreed, and the petrodollar was born. Here's why this was so brilliant. Oil is the most essential commodity in the industrial world. Every country needs it. Every economy runs on it. Transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, plastics, chemicals, modern civilization is built on oil. If oil can only be purchased in dollars, then every country in the world needs dollars. They need to hold dollar reserves. They need to earn dollars through trade. They need to use dollars for international transactions. This creates artificial demand for dollars completely independent of America's actual economic performance. A country in Asia buying oil from the Middle East has to use dollars for that transaction, even though neither buyer nor seller is American, even though the oil never touches American soil. Dollars become the mandatory intermediary. This is extraordinary power. It means America can print money, create dollars out of thin air, and the world has to accept those dollars because they need them to buy oil. It means the U.S. Treasury can run massive deficits because foreign countries need to buy treasury bonds to hold their dollar reserves. It means American banks dominate global finance because international oil trade flows through dollar-denominated accounts. The petrodollar turned the dollar into the world's reserve currency, not because the American economy was strongest, but because oil, the most critical commodity, was denominated in dollars. For 50 years, this system has been the foundation of American power. Yes, America has the world's most powerful military. Yes, America has led in technology and innovation. Yes, America has the largest economy. But the secret source of American dominance was always the petrodollar. It allowed America to run trade deficits for decades without consequences because the world needed dollars. It allowed America to impose sanctions that actually mattered because cutting a country off from dollars meant cutting them off from global oil markets. It allowed America to fund enormous military spending without the constraints that limit other nations because dollar demand was guaranteed. Think about what this means. America imports far more than it exports. Under normal economics, that should weaken the dollar. Countries would accumulate dollars and exchange them for other currencies, driving the dollar's value down. But under the petrodollar system, those countries can't dump their dollars because they need them to buy oil. So they hold dollars, they invest in dollar assets, they support the dollar's value even when economic fundamentals say they shouldn't. It's the greatest financial privilege in human history, and it's ending. June 9th, 2024. Saudi Arabia announced it would not renew the 50-year petrodollar agreement with the United States. For the first time since 1974, Saudi Arabia would accept currencies other than dollars for oil sales: yuan, euros, yen, even digital currencies. The exclusive dollar monopoly on oil transactions was over. Most media barely covered this. A few financial outlets mentioned it. Then the news cycle moved on. But this is the most significant geopolitical development in half a century, and almost nobody understands what just happened. Saudi Arabia didn't just change a payment option, they broke the foundation of American financial hegemony. Why did Saudi Arabia do this? The relationship between America and Saudi Arabia has been deteriorating for years. The Biden administration has been openly hostile to Saudi leadership. They released intelligence reports blaming Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. They have pushed Saudi Arabia on human rights. They've been lukewarm on Saudi security concerns about Iran. Meanwhile, China has been courting Saudi Arabia aggressively. In December 2022, Xi Jinping visited Riyadh for a major summit. The Chinese and Saudis signed agreements worth $30 billion. More importantly, they discussed selling oil in yuan. In March 2023, China brokered a historic rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, sworn enemies for decades. That deal, negotiated without any American involvement, showed Saudi Arabia that China could deliver diplomatic outcomes that America either couldn't or wouldn't pursue. China is now Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner. Chinese investment in Saudi Arabia is massive. Chinese technology is building Saudi infrastructure. Chinese influence is growing while American influence wanes. And China has been very clear about what they want: an end to dollar dominance in oil markets. But Saudi Arabia isn't acting alone. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, have been working for years to create alternative payment systems that bypass the dollar. They've developed the BRICS payment system, an alternative to SWIFT, the dollar-dominated international payment network. They've discussed creating a BRICS currency backed by commodities including oil and gold. They've signed bilateral trade agreements to settle transactions in local currencies, not dollars. Russia and China already conduct most of their trade in rubles and yuan. India buys Russian oil in rupees. Brazil and China trade in their respective currencies. In 2023, BRICS expanded to include Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, Egypt, and Ethiopia. These new members represent some of the world's largest oil producers. This isn't a coincidence. This is coordination. The world's major oil producers are aligning with the world's largest economies outside the Western sphere to create an alternative to the dollar-based system. And it's working. In 2023, the dollar's share of global reserve holdings fell to 58%, the lowest level in 28 years. It was 71% in 1999. Trade settled in dollars has been declining steadily. More transactions happen in euros, yuan, and other currencies. The sanctions America imposed on Russia after the Ukraine invasion accelerated this trend. Russia was cut off from SWIFT and had its dollar reserves frozen. This terrified other nations. If America could do this to Russia, they could do it to anyone. So countries began building backup systems, diversifying reserves, reducing dollar dependency. Here's what the death of the petrodollar means for America. First, demand for dollars will decline. Countries won't need to hold as many dollar reserves if they can buy oil in other currencies. As demand declines, the dollar's value will fall. This means imports become more expensive. Americans will pay more for everything from electronics to clothing to food. Second, Treasury bonds become less attractive. Foreign countries hold treasuries as a safe place to park their dollar reserves. If they need fewer dollars, they need fewer treasuries. This is catastrophic for U.S. government finances. America runs trillion-dollar deficits every year. Those deficits are financed by selling treasury bonds to foreign buyers. If foreign demand for treasuries declines, interest rates will have to rise to attract buyers. Higher interest rates mean higher debt service costs. The debt spiral accelerates. Remember, America already pays $1 trillion per year in interest on the national debt. If rates rise even a few percentage points, that number could double. Third, America loses its most powerful foreign policy tool, sanctions. Dollar-based sanctions only work because countries need dollars. If they can function without dollars, sanctions become toothless. Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, all under heavy sanctions, will find it easier to trade if they don't need dollars. This reduces American leverage over adversaries. Fourth, the cost of maintaining global military presence becomes unsustainable. America's 800-plus military bases worldwide cost hundreds of billions annually. The petrodollar helped finance this by creating external demand for dollars that absorbed U.S. deficits. Without the petrodollar, America will have to choose between massive military spending and economic stability. It can't have both. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Imagine you're a country that imports oil. Under the petrodollar system, you had to earn dollars through exports or borrowing, hold dollar reserves for oil purchases, use American banks for transactions, accept American financial regulations, remain vulnerable to American sanctions. Now, imagine the new system. You can buy oil directly in your local currency or yuan. Hold reserves in multiple currencies or gold use BRICS payment systems or bilateral arrangements. Ignore American financial regulations. Trade even if America disapproves. The difference is American power versus Chinese partnership, and country after country is choosing the second option. The UAE now accepts Yuan for oil sales. Indonesia does the same. Russia and India trade oil in rupees. Brazil and China trade in their currencies. Each transaction that bypasses the dollar is a brick removed from the foundation of American financial dominance. China understood this decades ago. The Belt and Road Initiative wasn't just about building ports and railways. It was about creating the infrastructure for a post-dollar world. All those loans to developing countries, they're denominated in yuan, not dollars. Recipients need yuan to repay them. All those Chinese-built ports, they facilitate trade that increasingly happens in yuan, not dollars. All those bilateral trade agreements, they specify settlement in local currencies or yuan, bypassing dollars. China has been systematically building an alternative financial architecture, and the end of the petrodollar is the moment that architecture becomes dominant. Think about the strategic genius here. China didn't attack the dollar directly. They didn't need to. They just built alternatives. They created options. They waited for countries to voluntarily choose those alternatives because they offered better terms than dollar dependence. And they positioned yuan as the obvious successor to the dollar in commodity markets. The implications for global power are staggering. For 50 years, America could spend beyond its means because the world financed American deficits. The petrodollar guaranteed buyers for treasury bonds, regardless of how irresponsible U.S. fiscal policy became. That guarantee is gone. For 50 years, America could impose its will through financial pressure because access to dollars meant access to the global economy. That leverage is disappearing. For 50 years, American military dominance was sustainable because the petrodollar subsidized it. That subsidy is ending. We're witnessing the end of American unipolar dominance, not through military defeat, through financial evolution. The world is moving toward a multipolar currency system. Dollars will remain important, but not dominant, not essential, just one option among several. And America will have to learn to function as a major power, not the major power. Here's what terrifies me most about this transition. It's happening so gradually that most Americans won't realize it until it's too late. There won't be a dramatic collapse. No single day when the dollar crashes. No obvious crisis moment. Just a slow, steady decline in living standards. Higher prices, lower purchasing power, reduced global influence, constrained policy options. Americans will wonder why everything costs more, why wages don't go as far, why the government keeps cutting services. They won't connect it to the petrodollar's death because nobody explained how important the petrodollar was in the first place. For 50 years, America enjoyed artificially high living standards because the petrodollar allowed us to import more than we exported and pay with printed currency that foreigners had to accept. That free lunch is ending, and the bill is coming due. Let me address the counter-argument. Some economists argue the petrodollar's importance is exaggerated. They point out that dollars are used for more than just oil, that American economic fundamentals still support the dollar. That reserve currency status depends on many factors beyond oil pricing. There's some truth to this. The dollar won't disappear overnight. America still has the world's largest economy, most liquid financial markets, strongest rule of law. But these economists miss the psychological dimension. The petrodollar wasn't just about transactions, it was about inevitability. Countries used dollars because they had to, not because they wanted to. That psychological lock is broken. Once countries realize they have choices, they'll make different choices. It's like a dam with a crack. Structural analysis might say the dam is still strong, the crack is small, the pressure is manageable. But once water starts flowing through that crack, the erosion accelerates, the crack widens, the pressure increases, and suddenly the entire structure fails faster than the models predicted. The petrodollar was the dam holding back a flood of alternatives. Saudi Arabia's decision is the crack. So what happens next? Over the next decade, I expect the dollar's share of global reserves to fall below 50%. This would be a psychological breaking point, ending the dollar's claim to be the reserve currency. Oil-producing nations increasingly accepting multiple currencies, with Yuan gaining significant market share in Asian oil trade, American Treasury auctions becoming more difficult, foreign buyers demanding higher yields to compensate for currency risk. This forcing the Federal Reserve to either allow rates to rise dramatically or resume money printing. U.S. government facing impossible fiscal choices. Cut spending drastically, raise taxes painfully, or inflate away the debt through currency debasement. American living standards adjusting downward as import prices rise and the subsidy of dollar privilege disappears. Global power increasingly multipolar with China as financial hegemon in Asia. Europe maintaining regional influence, America retaining but not dominating. This isn't speculation, this is the logical progression of current trends. The petrodollar's death isn't a future risk. It's a present reality that hasn't fully manifested in economic data yet. The tragedy is that this was predictable and preventable. America could have maintained better relations with Saudi Arabia, could have avoided using financial sanctions so aggressively that it terrified other nations, could have managed fiscal policy more responsibly. But American policymakers believed dollar dominance was permanent. They acted as if the privilege could never be lost. They were wrong. Saudi Arabia's decision to end the petrodollar agreement is the most significant geopolitical development since the end of the Cold War. It marks the beginning of the end of American financial hegemony, and most Americans have no idea it even happened. That's the real betrayal, not that Saudi Arabia made a strategic choice in their own interest, but that American leadership failed to prevent it, failed to prepare for it, and is failing to explain it to the public. The bill for 50 years of privilege is coming due, and we're not ready to pay it.